which is making it a more successful, sort of businesses that you're building at the moment?
It was a cryptocurrency mining company. So we actually built out a data center. We got an investor. It was, a few $100,000 initial investment, bought a bunch of miners, set it up like a data center, and ran it. There's a lot of money tied to every single action, including time. And this thing minted money, like crazy amounts of money for 8 hours until everyone else got their miners online, right?
What was the feedback you were getting from the users about the product?
So the feeling I get about product market fit, it doesn't just happen, right? Like you have this like varying levels of product market fit. And so I would say I'm kind of at the earlier stage of product market fit, but the way that
So it's really great to have on the show today, Jon Zeolla, who's CEO of Zenable. So Jon, how are you doing? Great to have you on the show.
Oh, it's always a beautiful day around here. Nice to meet you, Matt. Thank you for having me on.
Wonderful, mate. The sun shines on the righteous, doesn't it, as they say. So let's talk a bit about you and your background. You're an entrepreneur. You've got some exciting stuff that's going on in your space, but it'd be really good to take the listeners through a bit of a journey of where you've come from, the successes you've had historically, failures, where you studied, and the type of individual you are, and where you've come from. So yeah, tell us a bit about your history.
So I kind of started my career somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago. You can tell by the peppering gray in my beard. I started as an engineer, right? So like cybersecurity, quality, DevOps and SRE, things like that. And so I was building tools at largely regulated companies, financial institutions and retailers, things like that. I ended up kind of getting bit by a bug to start businesses when I was in like kind of my early 20s, mid 20s. And I started, I think at this point, 6 of them. A couple of them are almost like hobby businesses. One of them was a spectacular failure, which we can talk about. Those are always fun to learn from. One was a success, which is still going today, but I've moved out of day-to-day operations. So that was a consulting company. And then 2 years ago, I started my first product company, which is Zenable, the one that we're kind of focusing on today and where I'm spending most of my time. So I've been building a team, on the sales side, engineering side, and I'm kind of leading everything. I wear every hat, but mostly on the product and sales and marketing side, lots of engineering for the last 2 years. And I'm just a couple months ago, I went GA with the main product. So we went through some design partnerships, worked out some case studies, and found a couple people that really liked what we were building, which was cool because we pivoted a few times. So that's also interesting to talk about a little bit. But eventually we kind of like hit the nail on the head, it feels like. And so that's where we're at right now, is kind of like very early in this product market fit. We've got a product that seems to work. It's been running in production for a year and a half. And now we've got a little bit of momentum and the industry is kind of like properly educated on what it does. And so we're kind of like, how do we build the go-to-market engine and actually ship this thing? So that's kind of where the phase we're in right now.
Amazing. So there's loads of threads we can pull in that introduction. So thank you very much for that. So let's start with failure. I think that's a good place to start because I think you learn, as they say, you learn a lot more from failure than you do success. So talk us a little about what it was, the company, and how it didn't quite work out, and what you're sort of taking forward from those lessons, which is making it a more successful, sort of businesses that you're building at the moment.
So this was, I think it was the 2019, 2020 timeframe. It was just before COVID, and it was a cryptocurrency mining company, right? So we actually built out a data center. We built it locally. I had a friend who really wanted to get into cryptocurrency, and he also owned a lot of real estate. And he had a vacant building. We could put everything in there. We got an investor. It was, a few $100,000 initial investment, bought a bunch of miners, set it up like a data center, and ran it. We ran it for about 10 months. So it was nicely bucketed into 1 year. We didn't actually even have to run taxes on it ever, which was kind of convenient. We started it early in the year. We shut it down in November. And we mined cryptocurrency. And there was varying weird, situations that you run into in the cryptocurrency world. One is that everybody's trying to rip everybody off, right? Like literally everybody is trying to rip everyone off. So we're out there buying hardware and we're trying to find hardware online. And so we purchase what we think are these new miners. And what we end up getting is substantially delayed, right? We buy it and we get it a month and a half later. Like, why does it take so long? Like, oh, there's all these claims that it's being shipped from China and things like that. I'm like, okay, that's true, but also a month and a half. And then what we would find is we'd have these scratch marks on all of our devices. I don't know exactly what happened, but what I think happened was that there was a middleman that was buying the miners with my money, racking them, overclocking them, running them as hard as they could for like a month, and then sending them to me.
Right. Okay.
And the first month, because they were overclocking them, it would actually kind of like burn out some of the parts on these devices. And so we would get these like new devices with scratch marks, and then our failure rate was way higher than we expected, and the run rate was a little bit slower than we expected. That was interesting. And there was like 15 other problems. I'll kind of like aggregate as like everybody's just trying to rip you off, right? But yeah, that was an interesting experience. Lots of hardware, racking and unracking. I mostly ran the software side of things. Sure. So we would switch coins intelligently on the fly and mine different coins to make higher ROI. We would try to swap out providers for electricity to reduce costs, all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like a hell of a journey. And do you think like it's sort of almost a symptom of the lack of regulation in that space that allows people to almost think that they can rip people off? It's sort of not human nature in a way, but if there's lack of regulation, then people will push the boundaries.
Yeah, I think a little bit of that in kind of like the global scope, and the fact that there's a lot of money tied to every single action, including time, right? We bought some specialized ASICs that actually came directly from the manufacturer. We were one of the first ones to get it. And I remember I got it in the mail. I literally ran down to the data center, racked it, got it all set up and running. And this thing minted money, like crazy amounts of money for 8 hours until everyone else got their miners online, right? And then the coins adjust based on the speed that blocks are being mined. And then, so we made, I think, tens of thousands of dollars an hour for those few hours. Yeah. I think we made over $100,000 on this one. It was crazy. And then it went to something ridiculous, like less than $100 an hour of money, right? And it's like, it was all speed, right? And so because of those incentives and because of the lack of regulation and because of like shipping times and things like that, like there's all these sorts of like perverse incentives and abuses, and some people just straight up being malicious, which was unfortunate because I thought it was a lot of fun. The technology is very cool. But yeah, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the sort of one or two things that you took away from a learning from that experience then that you that's helping you in this stage of your career?
Well, one of them, ironically, was that speed really does matter, right? Like time to market and getting things done is really important. It reinforced it super well because it was literal dollars. But even like today, like what I'm doing with Zenable, we're building this like self-improving, self-learning coding agent that integrates with all of the big names out there. So you don't have to change from what your developers are using. They could use Cloud Code, Cursor, Codex, all the big names, but it reduces the switching cost and it self-learns and builds all of this like company level context that many companies don't have before. And like, honestly, 2 months in the market before anyone else is a huge win there, just like it is with cryptocurrency, that 8 hour block was there. I think that was really like my biggest takeaway from the whole thing. There was others, it was the first time I ever had an investor, was that, and kind of like managing investor relations, being straightforward with how you're going to use your money. There were some scenarios in that business where I was pressured to make a decision, and the decision was, do we spend money or not? And I was kind of like in between. I don't know that I really wanted to, but I had my partner that really wanted to. And so ultimately I said yes. I think my gut was telling me that we shouldn't have spent that money. And if I look back now, we probably shouldn't have spent that money. Yeah. And some of the other kind of like lessons learned is like, I stick with my gut more, and I kind of stick to my guns as well. Like if my gut tells me no, I'm going to say no. And as a business, we could decide to do something different, but my position is going to be whatever my position is.
Really interesting. Very good. So sharpened your entrepreneurial skill set there as well, and cash flow management, which is important, right? So yeah, great. So you talked about you've had another successful business, or is it consultancy? I think you said. Just before we go on to the big thing that you're on at the moment. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that sounds like a successful business. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that was fun. So I ran that company for about 7 years. I co-founded it with someone else. We had a nice kind of like offset set of skills. So he was better at executive presence. He had a C-level title at a big company previously. And so when we would go in to do board level presentations, he would take the lead. right? He would take the lead on the slide decks and the kind of narrative. And I always worked with engineers and middle management, and I was really good at like pushing things along and seeing results, like getting it done, right? And not letting them kind of like stagnate, or just like sometimes projects turn into tar pits, right? I'm like, well, why do we need to wait? What are we waiting for? I feel like there's 7 things we could do now, and then that one little bit, we could just fit that in the middle. We don't need to do nothing right now while we're waiting on that little bit. You know, how do you, almost project management, but more on the technical side.
Yeah.
Like, can we build out a design? Let's have a couple meetings. Let's brainstorm. Let's do experiments. And like, I can show you, like, instead of having a 2-hour long conversation about, you know, what's the better read optimized database for our use case, like I can just make synthetic data, spin up 3 databases, run the tests, and then extrapolate from there, read some documentation, especially with AI. Like, that's very doable. And so I always had this like bias to action and implementation. So we worked well together there, and we ran it together for a little over 7 years. And then whenever all of this AI stuff started getting really hot, and I started seeing the real world potential, not just like this idea, because I've been in machine learning since 2012, 2013 timeframe. So I was pretty familiar with, you know, turning words into vectors and things like that. But I was initially more convinced that it was a search engine use case. And then, you know, at some point about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, I was convinced, okay, we can actually use this in businesses. And when I saw that, I said, hey, Joe, my partner's name, I said, hey, Joe, I can't skip on this. I have to.
Yeah.
What's the plan we could put in place? So we put together like I think it was like a 4 to 5 month transitionary plan, transitioned me out. He took the reins, ran it. We promoted some people from within, took over some of my old job responsibilities, and it worked out great. I moved off to the side, and for a little while, my role was kind of quarterly strategy. So we would do these like half-day quarterly strategy sessions. Other than that, I was completely out of the loop. And then as of a few months ago, I'm 100% out of the loop. I don't even do the quarterly stuff anymore, and the company's still rolling.
And you still own the business though, but you just don't work in it, right? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. So kind of get all the perks of owning the business, and, you know, the sweat equity of spinning it up, but we don't have to, I don't have to do anything on the day-to-day basis, which is kind of nice.
Right. Well, yeah, that sounds great. And actually what you just described in terms of an exit sounds like it's like, you know, ideal, isn't it? To be able to retain ownership in something, but have it work for you instead of working in it, right? So that you can advance other opportunities, which is what we should talk about now, right? So it sounds exciting. So give us a bit of a background around, before you sort of talk about the product itself, what were the problems that you were seeing that you thought, you know, with the application of AI, or I think there's a space here that I can operate in and I can solve some real problems for people.
Yeah. So my background was kind of in platform systems engineering, machine learning and AI, and working in like super regulated spaces. And in these regulated spaces, you get audited all the time, right? And so you need this kind of like deterministic, solid base of evidence to show to auditors. But we had this kind of like stochastic, non-explainable AI tools coming into play that we wanted to use everywhere. And so what instantly popped to mind was like, how do I govern these AI tools? And then how do I pass audits if I want to use these AI tools in a large company? And those seemed like real problems. I wasn't seeing a lot of companies in the market really focusing on that yet, because we were such in the early days. You know, it felt like I was looking at something that would be a problem in a few years, but wasn't a problem yet. And I said, well, you know, I should probably start on that now. And I can take a big bet. Let me just take a few years and I'm going to work on that. So I hired up an engineering team. It wasn't just me. We've been working on this for years, doing the integrations, dog fooding ourselves, and working with design partners. And really around January of this year is where companies started to realize they needed it. So they were in the very early stages of like, oh, I've used it enough places. I've had enough pain points. I've had that audit that didn't go well. I need something like this, right? I need a governance tool. I need a guardrails tool. I need an observability tool, whatever you want to call it. But I need something to go around the fact that I'm using AI to write lots of code so that my teams can keep moving fast, keep using these tools. But I need to pass this audit, you know, especially in finance, right? You've got the OCC breathing down your neck. Like you can have some pretty tricky audits. You've got, you know, regulations different across the world. And then you've got, you know, vendors, especially in Fintech, you might have like SOC 2, ISO 27001. And those were actually things that at my consulting company, we would help companies implement, especially tech companies. Like we mostly worked with health tech and Fintech companies, right? And so it was not directly regulated, but kind of downstream regulated based on contracts with the financial institutions, healthcare companies, you know, things like that. And so I clearly saw like we're going to need this in a few years, started building it. And then in January, people started realizing they needed it. That's when I was able to really onboard in earnest, like some design partners that were like, no, I need a solution. We worked together, we built some cool things. And then that's where we started building out the case studies and the go-to-market. And so right now we're kind of in this phase, to be fully honest, we're in this phase where we're finalizing some new messaging and new outbound kind of capabilities. Like, how do we tell people that we even exist and that we solve this problem in a way that's clear? Yeah, someone told me recently, they're like, you're being a little too clever. Clear is more important than clever, right?
Sure.
And I'm like, totally valid, right? And so I'm trying to rip out all the cleverness from my marketing and from my go-to-market, even my elevator pitch, and say, like, just be clear. Like, if you're using these tools, they could have these results, and that's what we help manage. Plus, if you want to swap between those tools in the future, that's really painful because they all want lock-in. We help you reduce that switching cost, right? Can we make it like super simple and easy, and then have a sexy demo and all of those good stuff to actually get someone to go in on a pilot and kind of like move the process along.
Sounds really interesting, mate. So just from a practical perspective, tell us a little bit. You've mentioned design partners quite a few times. So just describe a little bit in the context of what you've done, what role they've played, and the benefit they have had in being able to help you shape the solution.
They're like my crazy ideas factory, right? They're not bound by tech debt, and they don't care what my backend looks like. They don't care what my technology stack is designed to do right now. They just kind of imagine things. And they're like, what would be cool is if you did this. And, my job is to work nights and weekends and see if that's possible, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what we did. And so, I had some of my own crazy ideas. So a lot of the time we are kind of like closely aligned, but not perfectly aligned. And so I can use something that was kind of an idea that I had where I started moving along that path and realign it to what someone would actually pay money for, right? And so that was really useful. And then other things like, I hate to say this, but kind of QA, right? QA in not does it work or does it not work, but is it smooth? Like, is the user experience smooth? Is it clear, right? Clear, not clever. And so, they found all kinds of bugs in my documentation, right? They found things where I didn't document it, or things where, like for instance, usage. We have rate limiting and usage caps. And I would talk about those things. I had them kind of documented in different places in the UI and in the tools, but they were like, dude, where's your one pager on how it works? I was like, yeah. That makes perfect sense, right? I had all this distributed information. I had written it down, but it wasn't discoverable by them or their agents. And so, I started making like one pagers that would like move that information from lots of different places to one place. And then I would just put pointers. And now it's much clearer, much easier to read. Skim, right? Because a lot of times it's like an executive or even a business person saying, does the model make sense? Or are we getting, abused? Or are we going to hit these limits all the time? Things like that. So kind of just like a lot of smoothing things out and then asking for crazy features was the biggest wins there. And putting me through the paces on all of the contractual paperwork, right? So they said, we need SOC 2, we need a DPA. How do you follow California Privacy Act or New York or European? I would hear those things from their legal team, and their legal teams were like chef's kiss amazing. I've never worked with better legal teams than my design partners. I got to talk to them and they actually like would help get on the same page instead of being this combative, like us versus you. We want to win every contract. We want to be, you're going to have to bend everything we say. It was very, very, very able to get on the same page quickly, which was great.
Sounds like they've been quite or played a material part in getting you to where you have been. So it feels like, would you recommend taking that approach in terms of if you're bringing something to market, that would be something you'd recommend to a listener if they wanted to go down that route?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it has to be balanced to some degree. Like you need to have a product that does something first, right? Before you start talking to them because you're going to dissuade them. But then, yeah, absolutely. As soon as you have something, they say like minimally viable product, right? Like some very basic thing that is useful to someone, try to get someone to just use it. They don't even have to give you money. Some people say hard line, you got to have paid partners, and all of my partners were paid. But I had free users before the paid partners even, and they were pure QA. Is it work? Does it not work? Is it broken or not? Essentially, friends and acquaintances and things like that. I would recommend both of those for sure.
Awesome. Talk to me about the product market fit and the feeling when you go, it's now, I have it now, because, you speak to a lot of entrepreneurs and they say, when you haven't got it, it's like, wading through treacle. It's like hitting your head against a brick wall. You just can't quite. But then when you've got it, there's it sort of opens up, and all of a sudden you're like, no, I've nailed this. Now I can see value, and I can see my customers really liking it. So talk to us a bit about, when that happened for you, and what were you experiencing? What were the feedback you were getting from the users about the product?
So the feeling I get about product market fit is it's not like it doesn't just happen, right? Like you have this like varying levels of product market fit. And so I would say I'm kind of at the earlier stage of product market fit, but the way that I saw it flip was when I was having conversations with people before product market fit. It felt like I was trying to convince them or like almost push it onto them.
Sure.
And when things flipped, which was both our pitch got better, our tool got better, and they knew that they needed it. But when we had those couple things, they started to ask questions that pulled information out of me. They're like, well, can you do this too? They were like extrapolating from the elevator pitch, and they were mapping it back to their own problems. And it was really whenever the dynamic went from pushing to pulling, where I felt like, oh, okay, like this is right. And it wasn't just like one or two calls. It became a pattern where over maybe like a 1 month period, every conversation I had flipped from before that. It was like kind of, let me convince you that this is useful, and people weren't quite getting it, to asking good questions, follow-ons, being able to map it to pains that they had or problems that it would solve. And in some cases, they didn't have those pains yet, but they could see the future where they would have that pain and how we would prevent it. Whenever they're bringing that stuff up and I don't have to think of the scenarios as an outsider, like that was really whenever I started to feel like it was the right match.
Must have been a good feeling as well, and slowly starting to turn the tide.
It's a wonderful feeling. After over a year, about a year and a half at that point of these conversations, feeling like I'm convincing people that it's important, like, trust me, this is going to be a big deal, and nobody caring, or like people visibly getting like distracted and being over here while I'm trying to talk to them. It's like, whereas now it's more of like, I see. Okay. Yeah. What about this? Like that's how the conversation is going. I'm like, oh yeah, like it feels a lot better to be on the other side of it for sure. It gives me a little bit more of a spark.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, all the hard work is coming to fruition. In terms of the sort of industry sectors, size of organization, where's the sweet spot for this, or is it fairly agnostic? It can serve and operate across all of these.
Yeah, it's definitely not agnostic, but it is pretty broad. We've made it for enterprises and really team usage. Individuals, like, a lot of people talk about like vibe coding, and you want to put guardrails around vibe coders and things like that. If those people are doing things on an individual basis, it does help them, but it doesn't feel as exciting or as useful until you get to teams or teams of teams, like groups and products. Because it's kind of designed based on my background working at large financial companies, retailers, et cetera, where we had literally 6,000 developers, right? And it's like, it's based on my experience there. And so the requirements are complicated, right? And then from my consulting background, like I would put these governance programs in place at, maybe 1,000, 300 to 1,000 developer technology companies. And they had these complicated problems, but they had really good engineers to work on it. But still, they had 8 product lines. They had legacy. They had the new thing. They had the thing that makes money in between. Or actually, in a lot of cases, legacy is what makes a lot of the money, right? Which is what makes it tough. But they had this whole like spectrum of tools and offerings and customers that require different things. And my idea was, how do we govern AI agents to understand all of that stuff without having people manually type it? Because like, of course we could type it. Of course I could put it in a markdown file. But like, whose job is it to manage the markdown file? And if the markdown file goes into an AI agent and the agent decides to follow the instructions, that's great, but it doesn't have to. It might choose not to. And when you get to an audit, that doesn't go well. And also, when you get to an audit, they want to say, great, how many times did your guardrails enforce to make sure that it was working, even if it didn't find anything? It's not possible to tell you that about a markdown file in a code repository, which is like, I have like this whole idea about like 4 levels of maturity, but that's like the level 1 maturity. Like that's where you should start. You should absolutely do that, but it's not going to get you to pass audits. It's kind of slow and wasteful, and someone's going to have to maintain it, which nobody wants to. So they just delegate it to AI, and which, just creates a bunch of slop. Especially if you use the GPT models, they're very wordy, right? And so you're constantly yelling at them. You can use the caveman approaches and things like that. But it's going to be hard to use. And so actually structuring the data, we have this whole like requirements schema and taxonomy and ontology. And one of the cool things that we just shipped is this like self-learning loop. So it's not just, do we have the idea of requirements? Like we do, we've got ways to enforce those requirements. We can do it with AI and guardrails and all that fun stuff. But when a developer is having that requirement enforced on it, can the developer or the agent say this is a bad requirement, right? Because that's what we've always wanted. Like we've always wanted this idea of guardrails, but we want you to tell us as a centralized security team. We want you to tell us when they suck and we'll make them better, but no one ever would. They just turn them off, right? Mm-hmm. And so the magic that we have now is if we just tell an agent to give feedback, it will. Mm-hmm. And so now I can make this self-improving loop. So it just gets better and better and better and better and better because the agent's giving feedback about why it's bad, why it wants to ignore it, et cetera. But at the same time, it's deterministic, fast, and we have all the audit evidence, like and all of the changes, the self-learning, you can choose to put human in the loop at any point of the process. So that can give you any requirements, any governance that you want, right? And so there's a couple of things, which are all like different building blocks that I built over a year. As soon as I glued them together, it's like, whoa, like this is what we want. This is exactly right.
Yeah. No, sweet. Sounds like a fantastic product, and very, very keen to see how that progresses for you in the market and how you get traction there. So great stuff. So final question for you, mate. So we ask everyone this. So what one piece of advice would have you given your 18-year-old self, which have stood you in good stead for your journey thus far? So what did you know, what you didn't know then, which you know now, which you would have liked to have known?
That's a good question. I think hard work is my best attribute. The fact that I can work hard, the fact that I can put the time in, do the experiments, that's what has led to a lot of successes for me. I'm not that smart, right? I've surrounded myself with other smart people. I've learned from them and I've worked hard. And so do that, right? Like as early as possible, go find people smarter than you and hang out with them, right? Yeah. Put in the time when they say something interesting, figure out why that's true, figure out why it's not true, understand it deeply, like just kind of keep digging and going lower and lower and lower until you feel like you understand it, right? And just like work hard.
That sounds good. I mean, to touch your point about surrounding yourself with intelligent people, I think it was at the CEO of NVIDIA said he's like, on his board or like his team, he's the most or the least intelligent person on that board. He surrounds himself, or you surround yourself, you're the average of the people that you surround yourself with. So, you know what I mean? It sort of brings it up. So I think, that really resonates in terms of what people say. So that's really good advice. And keep on working hard. I think we could all take that to heart. So great stuff, Jon. So if people are interested in understanding a bit about Zenable and also yourself, where do they need to go?
So zenable.io, zenable.io is the website. Jon Zeolla on LinkedIn is probably the best place to contact me as well. I'm on there probably a little bit more than I should be, but send me a message or a connection on there. I'm happy to talk anytime.
Sounds great. Awesome. And thank you very much for coming today. It's been a really insightful conversation.
Absolutely. This was fun. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers. And if you're interested in hearing more, please subscribe for more content to come, and see you at the next episode. Thank you.